Well, hello there. Nick O'Sullivan, and I'll be talking to you about decoupled translations with Drupal and Gatsby today. So I am based in the UK. I work for Amazy Labs as a remote developer, which, in the past sort of year and a bit is less novel because everyone's kind of doing it. But yeah, when travel is free, I'll be in other places, which is a real nice benefit of having a kind of remote job. And hello to everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. So the reason why I thought I'd come up here and talk to you is I have a little bit of experience with Drupal. I'm sure not as much as a lot of people here. And I've been working with 7, 8, and 9, a bit of 6 earlier on. And the past year and a bit at Maisie, we're more or less just doing decoupled, at least in my team, using primarily Gatsby, Next.js, and a range of backends, mostly Drupal. Can't get away from it. And also Contentful as well. So it's been really nice to be working on those kind of projects over the last year or so. And for most of our clients, we always need multilingual sites. We're sort of based in Switzerland, Zurich. So a lot of our clients need multilingual sites. In previous agencies, I had a very different experience. Multilingual, it might be the odd project, but the norm was maybe just in English, because I guess it depends on geographical location, and then you get some clients that need multiple ones. So it'd be cool to hear from all of you. I'll just open up a poll to see how often you're working on multilingual sites. So for me, with Amazy now, it's basically all the time. It would be the exception if we were doing it in one language. And before, in previous jobs in a different agencies, it would be once in a blue moon. So I'm going to go ahead and click all the time. We're seeing those numbers very much. Cool. Okay. So we've got sort of majority of once in a blue moon. So yes, hopefully this should be interesting for all of you. Some of you that it's your everyday, and I'm sure hopefully you'll learn something, and others will ease in and start by sort of going over the two kinds of translations within websites and Drupal. So you basically have content translations and interface translations. So content translations are anything translated and edited within Drupal, let's say, or any other CMS. And that's coming from the client. Usually they'll be writing an article, blog post, and then we have interface translations. So those are basically any of the bits of text around your website that isn't content from the client. So, for instance, maybe a submit label on a button. So anything within the code that has a string of text would be classed as an interface translation. And usually, there are different ways in a decoupled architecture to go about doing that. And I've just kind of laid out the kind of differences between those. And the important thing is with interface translations is it starts with, the makers, the developers. So they'll define those, and eventually that will make its way over to, the content editor or translator, who will have to take that little string that you've written in PHP Storm or VS Code or whatever it is, and they'll have to translate it into, let's say, 9 different languages or something. So yeah, it's kind of a different relationship where, you know, with content translations, it will be within this similar team. So yeah, it puts a bit of responsibility on us as developers. And yeah, that's kind of, yeah, the two main areas of translation, and we'll be touching on those throughout, because yeah, there's this distinction of those in Drupal and associated functionality there. So my goal, after having quite a few different project setups, so all decoupled, but maybe they have their interface translations in different places, depending on the client's requirements. So there was one project where we kind of took on a legacy Drupal 7 system that already had a whole sort of repository of translated strings for buttons, listings, result summaries, and all of these kind of things. And in that case, we had to sort of adapt to that, and they were all stored in custom entities within Drupal 7. So we had a Gatsby app that was, retrieving those and writing to them. And then, we've had sort of using spreadsheets, because that's often just a Google spreadsheet, because it's free, and it's fairly easy for the client to just pick up and go, and start translating there, and maybe pass to someone else on their team, and they don't have to have like a Drupal login or anything like that. So yeah, we've had a variety of solutions that we've had to go with. So I wanted to try and find a unified approach, because Drupal has amazing interface for translating interface translations that would usually be picked up in Twig templates. So you might be familiar with that. In a Twig template, you can wrap a certain bit of text with the T function, and then that will tell Drupal that this needs to be translated. And if we just go over to, you'll get a screen similar like this, in which you can manage your interface translations within Drupal. So what I needed to find out with that goal of trying to get a more unified approach was, can we do it? Can we manage interface translations from a separate front end in Drupal? Because it'd be nice. We're editing our content there, so why not our interface translations? Because it's more or less content, similar people. Sometimes you have different translation teams that will do it if it's a huge project. So it was, I just started kind of thinking about it and looking at how interface translations are stored in Drupal, and they can't be exposed via JSON API, which is kind of the core approach to a decoupled solution. And so there was the gap there that, we can get content translations easily and use them in any front end using JSON API, or other solutions like GraphQL. So it was kind of, first I just sort of assessed what was missing, and it's mainly that. So being able to expose JSON interface translations via an endpoint. And then sort of looked at Gatsby as well to say, what do I need to do here? And Gatsby, it's an ecosystem. Out the box, it doesn't do a whole lot in terms of content translations. It does a whole lot, a lot of magic in every other sense. But the way Gatsby kind of works is you'll have these source plugins, and that can really come from anywhere. You can write your own source plugins to get content from anywhere. And for Drupal, to get those content translations or just content, if you're thinking in a non-multilingual sense, there's a Gatsby source Drupal plugin, and that's maintained officially by Gatsby. So that's all good, brilliant. We'll use that. I thought to myself when I was doing this, and there was the need for a patch as well. We do love a good patch, don't we? And this is one of those ones that's been open for a long time. So yeah, as long as you apply that patch and use the Gatsby source Drupal plugin, you can get your multilingual content into Gatsby, and it all works nicely. And then on the side of interface translations, so being able to define them, retrieve them, write them somewhere. Again, nothing out of the box, but there are plenty of starters that kind of set a foundation for internationalization. Starters in Gatsby are kind of like, I guess, profiles in Drupal. And there are various starters there that use IoT Next, which is a framework for internationalization. And it seems to be, one of the most popular ones. And I've used it on, quite a few projects, and it works nicely. It's not specific to Gatsby. They have like a React version of it that people use in Gatsby, but it's, for all sorts of front ends, whether that's Vue or whatever you like. And so if you are using IoT Next, that basically just says, can you give me a JSON object of all the translatable strings, and I'll do my best to replace those instances around your website with the correct translation. So going back to that goal of being able to manage both the content and interface translations in Drupal, we know that content's fine. Drupal's got that covered. It's available, in the JSON API module, which is in core. So not a whole lot to do there. And then the bit that's missing was being able to basically expose those interface translations. So I had to look into it, and it's always surprising when you find out that something you want to do hasn't been done. So I got to it and thinking about how do I want this to work. So from end to end, in a Gatsby app or similar, you'd use a T function like you would in a Twig template in a more traditional Drupal architecture. So you'd wrap that string in a T function, and then I wanted it to be nice and automated so that whenever the app or website is built, it will actually just scan through automatically, find all the usages, and then push those up to Drupal, and those would nicely appear in our Drupal interface translations UI. So any logged in content editors could go there with the right permissions, of course, and translate those strings that we've added. And then once those have been added, and like various synchronization, maybe on deployment, those will be pulled down from Drupal into Gatsby, and then that will be passed to IoT Next, and then we'll see the translated value in Gatsby. So that's kind of how I had it in my mind, and it just made me feel kind of good to kind of get that clear, unified approach, because we've done all different solutions, and it would be nice to have it all in one place, nice and tidy, like developers want. It's often quite therapeutic, I think, finding sort of organization and code and solutions. So the missing pieces in Drupal, as I mentioned, is getting interface translations out and into Drupal, because they are not entities as we know it in Drupal. So they're not exposed via JSON API. And so what we need to do is create an endpoint for retrieving and one for adding. So to do that, I got together a little module, which you can take a look at. And effectively that just creates two endpoints, one for retrieving and one for posting. So for adding any translations, here we just have the retrieval. So we can see we've kind of organized this by lang code. So whatever enabled languages there are in Drupal, it can just expose those interface translations, which is good. We can use that. It's we can then retrieve that from Gatsby and get some translated pages. And also the adding. So from the Gatsby app, we want to be able to say, here's a bunch of strings, can you get those added to Drupal, please? And then those can be translated. So that's what that module does. So that was some work I did on there. And it's working pretty well. And then looked over at Gatsby and said, okay, what do I need to do here? And it's always nice to have things nice and separate, because it's like, okay, cool, Drupal's done. We've got those two endpoints. Now, how are we going to hook this up to Gatsby? So going back to our goal, we want to sort of be managing retrieving content, translated content, and interface translations. So multilingual content, it's all good. We've got the source plugin. So apply that patch and you're up and running. And then on the interface translation side, we need to basically start retrieving those interface translations from Drupal and also pushing them as well. So that whole scanning thing that I spoke about before, which isn't as hard as it sounds, because everyone's done these kind of things before. So it's it's just using sort of libraries that we already have, or plugins, packages. So the missing pieces were retrieve those translations from Drupal, so that when a Gatsby site is built, every time it runs through the build process, it will say, hey, I also need these interface translations, as well as all that lovely content, all those recipes, if we're using Umami. And also, I've got these couple of strings that I need to get translated, so we'll send those through. And also, I wanted to make it kind of plug and play, to be able to just say, okay, get my T function, wrap this, and then the rest is all done. And I was able to do that with creating a Gatsby plugin. So you can find that on Gatsby or npm. And essentially just add this plugin, and then you can import the T function, which is provided from IITnext. So that's nothing I've done. But what the plugin does is wrap it all nicely so that IITN is initialized and everything, and you can kind of define where your Drupal instance is, and username, password for basic-auth, because obviously this is accessing restricted content, I guess, because you want to always lock that down. So that was the Gatsby plugin, and I've created an example repository over here that basically just includes yeah, the two apps. So a Drupal install with the yeah, with the decoupled interface translations module included, and also a Gatsby starter with the I18N plugin there. So yeah, you should be able to check that out if it's fairly interesting to you, and have a play with that. It would be great to have any feedback on that. And yeah, hopefully you can just get up and running with that. And yeah, I'm just going to go into a bit more detail around the Drupal setup and Gatsby. So look at how all the steps are working, because essentially, if you have that module and that plugin on Gatsby, it all kind of handles itself. And yeah, you define your strings in the Gatsby app, and then they magically appear in Drupal. You can translate those, and next time the Gatsby app builds, it'll come through. And yeah, I'll just explain how that happened. So yeah, with the content side of things, because the example includes the sourcing of the content, not only the interface translations. So yeah, setting up JSON API is fairly simple. It's yeah, basically enabling some modules. And for my example, I just used the Umami demo profile to make that nice and quickly. So yeah, Drupal makes that very easy to be exposing that multilingual content via JSON API, and that will be then used by the Gatsby Drupal source plugin. And just a note there to use a API user of some sort to lock it down. In this context, there's not really that big a deal about people seeing publicly available translations, but it's always a good idea because maybe you have a private app that has translation strings in there as well, something like that. Always a good idea. And then, yeah, exposing the translations themselves at an endpoint. So, yeah, it's as simple as installing the decoupled interface translations module that I created. And then that gives you two endpoints that will just be used by the Gatsby plugin. And yeah, so there's just a bit more detail on the actual endpoints that we have. And yeah, it creates it all in a format that's easily digestible by I18 Next. And yeah, I think that's it, because you've already seen the sort of output there. And then into the Gatsby setup. So yeah, we've got for the content, we just need the Drupal source plugin maintained by Gatsby officially, and with still the open pull request patch that you need to apply. And then, yeah, as we saw within the plugin README, we just basically need to define that, whether that's in an environment file or yeah, directly here. And then once that's all configured, so you've got your source plugin for Drupal, and you've configured the interface translations, then basically Gatsby will run, and on build it will source all that data, and then that basically creates GraphQL nodes within Gatsby. So if we just take a look around here somewhere, cool. So what actually it produces are GraphQL nodes. So we can see here we have the recipes. So this is the umami profile. And yeah, essentially in Gatsby, whenever you have a source plugin, it will create Gatsby nodes or GraphQL nodes, and those can then be queried in any way in the Gatsby app. So out the box, it will just create these, and then basically that's your data to play with however you want. And in this case, you'd probably want to create like a page for each recipe. So then that would be the next step. There's lots of documentation out there on Gatsby site. So you essentially take that data and then you'll create pages for each of those recipes. And you can define your template for each of those, and you would end up with something like this. So this is all sourced from JSON API on a Drupal 9 install, and it's just using the Drupal source plugin, but also it's using the interface, decoupled interface translations module on Drupal side, and IT Next inside the plugin that I've created. So we can see here we've got the English version, and we also have the Spanish version. So if we kind of have a look at this content, this is all from Drupal, from the content. So that's sourced from the Drupal source plugin, and then this because that's not content, it's not a title or a summary or the steps. This is an example of a interface translation, and that can be defined in the code just with a T function. So if we just go back to here, we can see the source of this page. So it's basically a React component. Well, it is exactly that. And we have a translated string here. So again, that T function that's provided by IT Next. And then the rest here is coming from dynamic content from Drupal, which, like we saw in that GraphQL Explorer, can be retrieved using GraphQL queries like this. So you can kind of see, we've got content here, here, and here, and then that's our interface translation here. And we can just go have a look. Sorry. Am I apologizing for Drupal? Okay, cool. So we have our method source string here. And what's cool about Drupal interface translations is a very important thing when it comes to interface translation is context. And for this, because you might have a Drupal site that has loads of different apps, and you're able to add that context to explain where that's used, because obviously within a normal Drupal site we also have other interface translations that are nothing to do with the Gatsby site, so we have that context here, and you can see that we've translated it here and that appears as expected. And then, what else is happening in the build process? We've got the IT Next scanner, which is pretty cool because basically it will go through all of the files or at least the files that you tell it to, and it will look for usages of the T function, and then it will extract that, and then what I've done within the plugin that I created was to then post what it finds to the endpoint that I created in Drupal, and then yeah, that sort of magic starts to happen, and yeah, you end up with interface translations manageable in Drupal. Just looking at the time running out. So yeah, some improvements here, or different ways to approach it. You could look at sourcing Drupal content from the GraphQL API instead of JSON API, especially in sort of Gatsby React world using TypeScript. There's the big benefit of having type inference based on the GraphQL schema instead of from the JSON API where it's kind of bases it on the content available. And yeah, you don't have to sort of have it all unified. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to have it all in the same place because certain people might not have access to Drupal, or there might be some kind of ring fencing around access. So in those cases, maybe yeah, you just put it into a spreadsheet and work like that. I think a real improvement, and what I always find in multilingual decoupled solutions, and probably the same in more traditional setups, is when the translations actually get to the translation team. So for instance, here, they just get given the word method, and in certain languages, it's never quite, a straightforward replacement. So having that context of where does this live, like in what context is it used? So that's very important. That always comes up, and there are different approaches to solving that. What I've seen is a really cool solution that has kind of inline translation. So it kind of highlights each of the usages of the T function, and then has like I think it's called localized. It's kind of the moneymaker for the people that made ITN. I'm not getting any commission for this, and I haven't used it. But it's kind of like in context editing, which I think is really cool. So you're actually viewing the site and it's like, okay, I want to, yeah, translate that. But generally just a bit of, information is helpful around strings. And also I found in the Drupal UI that it will be super good, and maybe I'll do it at some point, just to have a filter here, because basically you have all interface translations have the ability to have a context, but there isn't a real way unless you're programmatically retrieving those interface translations to kind of filter here, because all of these are from the admin probably. And then it will be good to filter by context, because if you have a look, case sensitive, so an ability to filter by that would be awesome. And just the last slide now. So again, just reiterating the point, know who you're creating the translation workflow for, what they'll have access to, and do think about it early on in the project, because you can start mounting up hundreds of these interface translations, and then you might get to like a month before go live or a deployment, and it's like, okay, we're passing those to the translation team, and they're like, what's all this? I'll just see method submit, and it's not very helpful. So be considerate of whoever's going to have to translate all those things that you've wrapped in with T functions. I'm saying it to myself too. And yeah, what we haven't really touched on, and obviously there's a lot of detail we haven't touched on, but considering markup, more complicated translations, like plurality and replacement variables. Replacement variables are fairly straightforward, but the other two can have some considerations you might need to think about. And yeah, also development workflow. So that development, experience of how do I add a translatable string, and how do I know it's gone, and yeah, just things like that. Thank you very much for listening today. I hope it's been of some use, and I'll just have a look on the Q&A if we have some time. Are more people using rather than next? I think so. I mean, so this is, are more people using Gatsby rather than Next.js with headless Drupal? I don't know. I don't know the stats on that. But just from my perspective, probably. It's what all the cool kids are using, isn't it? And yes, the slides are available. Erin's nicely provided that. So thank you, Erin, very much for moderating this. And one more from Kevin for content translations. Have you worked with Gatsby working along with an external translation service like Lingotek? No, I would be happy to hear about that. I don't know if you have any more information on that, Kevin. Yeah, that is something that we haven't really worked with. So I guess, is that outsourcing the translations, maybe? Yeah, no, that would be interesting to talk. And yeah, just have a look in the chat. Should be at the top. There's those slides. And yeah, if you've got any questions, just drop me a tweet, NBAO Sullivan. And yeah, thanks again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your DrupalCon. Take care.